Good afternoon and welcome to the Wednesday, April 6, 2022 meeting of the Lincoln Safe and Successful Kids Interlocal. I'd like to acknowledge that the Open Meetings Act is posted at the back of the room, the entranceway, and I'd like to welcome everybody and thank everyone for attending today, even those that are watching at home, and then ask the clerk to call roll to make sure we can establish quorum and continue with our meeting.
Kathy Dana.
Here.
Connie Duncan.
She is excused.
John Mayhew.
Present.
Richard Reed.
Here.
Darian Gayler Beard.
Here.
Penny Show.
Here. Yay, thank you. Item 3 on our agenda is the approval of the minutes, and we have minutes from our August 26th and our November 16th meeting. I'd like to entertain a motion to adopt the minutes from both our meetings. Ms. Danick.
So moved.
Mr. McGinnis.
Second.
And you can just yell out
I'm
here.
going to get used to this a little bit.
Yes.
I need to approve one and abstain from the other because of an absence. I don't know how you want to handle that.
Okay, I understand what you're saying. So having heard that, I think we'll need to entertain them separately. The November 16th one is the one you're abstaining from?
Guinness too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'd like to have a motion to adopt the minutes from the August 26th meeting. And second from someone? Second. Motion by Ms. Danick, second by Mr. Mayhew. Would you call the roll on approval of the minutes for the August 26th meeting?
Kathy.
Yes.
Connie. I'm sorry. Connie's not here. Don.
Yes.
Richard.
Yes.
Darian.
Yes.
Penny.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you. Now I'd like to have a motion to approve the minutes from our November 16th meeting. Would someone help me with that?
I can make
So
the
moved.
motion. I'll second it.
Motion by Mr. Mayhew, second by Ms. Danick. In discussion of those minutes, long pause, nothing happens. Would you call the roll, please?
I have a question
Okay, hang on the roll call.
before not on the minutes, but on the process. If we only have one and it takes two from each side to pass it,
Yes, actually, Dr. Neal and I were just discussing that. Mayor, if you feel comfortable voting for it, we would need your vote because we need 2 votes on each side for something to pass. Otherwise, it would all carry over to the next agenda. So thank you for bringing that up.
Richard said he feels comfortable too.
Okay.
I
Thank
just
you.
wanted to make sure we clarified that before
Thank
we
you.
voted.
All righty then. So roll call for everybody. Here we go. Thank you for the discussion over the minutes. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll on adoption of the minutes from the November 16th meeting?
Kathy.
Yes.
Don.
Yes.
Richard.
Yes.
Darian.
Abstain.
Penny.
Yes. I think we're going to go motion carries. Moving on. Next item on our agenda is public comment on. So we're now open for the public to make comments on anything that's not on our agenda for today's meeting. Is there anyone in the chamber that would like to address us now? Going, okay, this is a good thing. Item number 5 on our agenda, report regarding the Community Learning Center Initiative. And who will help me with that today?
Dr. Neal.
Nola will do the presentation. I'll just do a couple short introductory remarks.
Thank you, Mr.
As Nola walks you through the CLCs that provide support across our community, I just want to do a reminder. You have a single person speaking here, but she'll be representing, including our lead agencies and the number of providers that come in and volunteer, provide services, over 100 organizations in our community. It's a large network of people coming from all over the city to support our students, our families, and our schools, using our schools as a hub. So sometimes it's hard to conceptualize the size of that network when it's a single person talking, but please, as you listen with the sense of this is the entire community coming together in this endeavor that we'll share with you today. With that, I'll turn things over.
Thank you,
to
Mr.
Nola.
Neal.
Good afternoon. I am excited to be here to give the annual update on the Lincoln Community Learning Centers.
Would you reintroduce yourself just for fun?
Sure. Nola Derby Bennett, and I am the director of Lincoln Community Learning Centers.
Yay.
Yay. Okay, so let's see. Oh, I'm going too far here. Let's start over. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about who we are and what we do. So the Lincoln Community Learning Centers is a network, like Dr. Neal said, of 10 different nonprofit lead agencies serving 29 schools in our district. We serve all schools that are over 40% free or reduced lunch. And our mission and our principles is really to, our outcomes are smart kids, thriving families, and strong neighborhoods. And so we get there in a few different ways. We have collaboration, as we said, with lots of different nonprofits and with lots of different partners in our community. And our work is really centered around that full service community school model of supporting the whole child by wrapping around that student, their families, and the neighborhood. So I want to start first by acknowledging our office staff. And so we have a staff of 10 extremely dedicated people who do lots of really hard work to make all of this happen in our community. In the 4.5 years that I've been in this job, we've doubled our office staff. And we've been able to add a pretty large group of community workers to our system, and that is as a result of funding that we've been able to obtain through Prosper Lincoln. And so, as our network grows, we continue to need funding and support from lots of different areas of our community. And so we're really focusing on that strong neighborhoods focus that Prosper Lincoln has, and we've been able to add 4 community builders to our team who have really been focused on building up the community networks so that the communities feel, all of our neighborhoods and communities feel like they can have voice and can thrive with the tools that they've been given and have access through support from community learning centers. We also have 2 full-time curriculum specialists for the first time ever in our system's history. And so we really feel like, and we've been able to already see the results of higher quality academic programming just by having 2 people who are really focusing on, what it looks like to provide after school programming and that high quality experience for our students and others that are accessing our services. So again, here's the list of our 10 lead agency partners. Some of them serve 1 school, some of them serve 8 schools. So, but we could not do this work without these lead agency partners. They, as we'll get through into the budget here in just a minute, you'll see how much of a financial contribution they make and continue to make, even as it has become more difficult through the pandemic. So let's talk a little bit about budget. So this is the combined budget. This is the full CLC budget for this 21-22 school year. We started out the year with a budget of just a little over $9 million. And I'm going to show you in a minute how those dollars break down between leadership of the programming or leadership of the entity and programming dollars. But again, I really want to point out that our community partners are the largest contributor at about 28% of the overall CLC budget. And then I'm going to go forward to, this is a split out. So the budget that you see on the left-hand side is the leadership budget. So that includes the leadership staff on my team, as well as all of the full-time school community coordinators at each one of those 29 schools. And then the budget on the left-hand or the right-hand side is the programming budget. So that is direct programming that goes to our students and their families. And again, our community partners are picking up largely the largest amount of those budgets. So one of the things that has been really a cornerstone of the full service community school model is that family and neighborhood engagement. And so what we know is that the more that we can support families and neighborhoods, the more dedicated and focused our students can be in the classroom. And we also want to provide opportunities for our families to get together and network. That has been very difficult over the last couple of years, as you can imagine. We are looking forward to moving forward hopefully with more opportunities where people can gather and create relationships and create informal support networks. So we had to get pretty creative over the last couple of years during the pandemic. We did a lot of take-home opportunities. We've done a lot of virtual experiences for our students and their families. And we have had some opportunities as the pandemic has ebbed and flowed to get together and do some gathering and some outdoor programming. Last summer, the Calvert neighborhood had heard a presentation on the community health endowments mapping and learned that the Calvert neighborhood was one where prenatal care was extremely low. Neighbors were not accessing prenatal care. And so the Calvert School Neighborhood Advisory Committee felt very strongly that they wanted to create some networks so that neighbors knew where to go for prenatal care and were able to provide support. And so they hosted in the park just to the south of Calvert Elementary School. They hosted a community baby shower where they brought in lots of community partners. They had the string beans perform, which is always a draw. And they had lots of giveaways. And so what we heard from the participants was that it was really great to learn about resources that they didn't know that existed. We actually heard from one participant who's had a spouse who was deployed in the military that she didn't have a birth plan and was able to connect with a doula at that event that was able to attend her child's birth. And so she thought she was going to be alone during the birth of her first child, and then she was able to connect with someone who was able to be a support for her. So that is a result of some of the work of our community builders, as well as lots of our community partners and family and neighborhood who are connected at that school. And so that's just one of the things that we know has happened as a result of, first of all, increased funding, increased support for our CLCs, but then also, connecting with neighborhoods and the community and really following the data that is being provided to us and showing us where the needs are. Again, we have lots of parents who are engaged. We've talked a lot over the last few years about our community cafe model, which is a model where parents host informal conversations at their schools. We have a network of parent hosts at this point who not only are hosting really important conversations within our CLC schools, inviting families and neighborhoods or neighbors who are connected to the school, but also, the larger community to come in and have conversations. One of the interesting conversations that came out of a community cafe was at the Saratoga school. They had a student who was hit in the crosswalk by a car, and so they were able to bring in Lincoln Transportation and Utilities, families, leadership from the school, LPS safety to have a conversation about how to make that a safer place for kids to be and to hopefully all work together to have a safe experience for the students. So our community cafe parents are now actually doing some training statewide as a result of having seen a lot of really great success here in Lincoln engaging families. So
Nice.
we think that that's really exciting as well. So of course, a big piece of the work that we do is centered around improving our students' success, both academically, attendance-wise, physical, social, and emotional, and then having hope for their futures. So, did that go forward? No? There we go. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the students that we serve. So this is going to be a chart over the last 4 years of the number of students that we served. So pretty clearly, in 2021, our numbers were down. And we know that that is for a variety of different pandemic-related reasons. We had a lot of parents who were working from home. Our space was limited. We were limited to being able to mix groups of students together. We had to keep classrooms sort of cohorted and separate. And so that, of course, takes more staff, which we sometimes have a hard time with, especially during the pandemic. So we knew that our numbers would be down last year, and we anticipate that they will be up this year from last year's numbers, but probably not to the level of our pre-pandemic numbers. One of the numbers that I do want to point out on that top section of this chart is the summer school wraparound number, and that is a number that we only began capturing last year. We were able to offer a wraparound program for summer school last year, and I'm going to pause for a second and explain what wraparound is. So summer school is offered during the month of June in the mornings at our schools. What we realized, and I as a parent sort of identified, was if I had to have my child at summer school in the morning, I would have to move her in the middle of the day, which as a working parent would be very, very hard for our family to be able to do. So we would probably have had to opt out of summer school. So what we did as a CLC network was we offered a wraparound experience. So after summer school gets over, the students can stay for lunch, and then they transition into CLC programming in the afternoon, providing a full day of programming for those students. And we were able to do that through some CARES Act funding that was granted to Beyond School Bells that then we applied for, and were able to provide those experiences at the school. We had a very short timeline to get that program up and running. As we remember from last year, getting those dollars sometimes out the door was really hard, and so we had about a month only to get wraparound up and going. So we didn't offer that at all of our schools, but at the ones that they were able to offer it, we were able to serve almost 1,200 students. No cost to families, which we know is an economic support then to them as well. And those students had full day of high quality programming with summer school in the morning and CLC in the afternoon. We already know that we've been able to secure funding for the next 3 summers. So this summer, the summer of 23, and the summer of 24, through the ESSER funding that has been granted to LPS. And so our CLC schools will be offering wraparound for the next 3 summers at no cost to families. And those students will all have a full day experience. So we're very excited about that. And I anticipate that number to go up exponentially this next year. And then the bottom section is our demographic data. That really didn't change through the pandemic. So even though our numbers went down, we were still serving the same demographics of students that we had served pre-pandemic. And then here's just a breakdown of free reduced lunch participants. This usually looks very steady, that CLC is serving higher free reduced lunch participants than our total LPS population. Of course, that makes sense because we're serving schools that have the higher free reduced lunch populations. And then here's just our gender and race breakdowns. So our percentage of white students served is lower than the overall LPS average, but our percentage of all other demographics is higher than the LPS averages. And our genders are at pretty much a 50-50 split. So one of the things that I wanted to bring to this group, just as something to consider as we move forward, I know some of you have been hearing CLC reports for a really long time, and you know that one of the benchmarks that we report on is the 30-day attenders. So that 30 days of attendance is a benchmark for us, and that's an attendance number that we report on. We know that if students attend CLC 30 days or more, their test scores are higher. All of the different other measures that we look at tend to be higher. And so, of course, the feds are changing our measures this year. So we will no longer be looking at 30-day or more attenders. We're looking at hours of attendance. And one of the things that we think is really valuable in looking at hours versus days is that we can capture, if a student attends 45 minutes here and a half hour over here, we can add those together. So we're getting more dosage. We're able to count more dosage of CLC than we've been able to count before, when it was just a full day of programming. If they didn't attend at least an hour, we didn't get to count that day at all. Now we can add those hours together and consider the dosage that they're getting. We're also looking at some things that we do have control over and some things that we don't necessarily have control over. We're looking at things like in-school suspension rates. We're looking at school day attendance. We're looking at student engagement, which is reflected on the teacher surveys that the teachers fill out. We're also looking at GPA, which isn't necessarily something that we totally have impact on in the CLCs. However, it will be interesting to see what those numbers look like as they begin to come out and we begin to compare them year over year. We don't have, of course, lots of other testing data that we have reported on in the past because those tests were also interrupted by the pandemic. So once we get started with testing again this year, we will be reporting baseline data for next year, as they wouldn't really be comparable to pre-pandemic numbers. So that's kind of the overall summary of what we've been up to in CLC this last year. We are very much looking forward to some of the reduced restrictions and the opportunities to get back together. We've already had lots of family engagement events scheduled for this final quarter of the school year. We have lots of exciting things planned for the summer. So I'm very excited to be able to capture all of that and come back next year with hopefully a more comprehensive report. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Ms. Bennett. Ms. Danny, questions?
So the CLCs for the secondary were relatively new right before the pandemic. How are you seeing the participation levels at the high school level?
That's a great question. Yeah, so we added 3 new schools right before the pandemic started, 2 high schools and 1 elementary school. And we've actually had really great results. Lincoln High had already been running a club, like an internal club program. And so transitioning that to a CLC was very easy. We had lots of great partners that we were able to continue running outside partner clubs throughout the pandemic. And so we were really able to build up that programming. We've, taken the time to really survey the students and learn what it is that they want to do and provide those opportunities for them. So we've actually seen high school numbers grow over the last 3 years. And we, anticipate that as we're able to kind of loosen things up and bring more partners in, do more field trips, do more outside kinds of experiences, lots of internships planned for the summer with community partners and employers, we really expect to see those numbers go up over the next few years.
That's really great because the kids that aren't in athletics after school kind of just
Yes.
they're on their own, and this kind of gives them a place to be.
Yes.
Unless they live by the bay.
Yes, our focus has always been, let's find a way to make every student feel like they're connected to the school.
I saw a large contingency at North Star a couple weeks ago. Do I have to push it on, Benny? Sorry, ours are automatically. We don't get to touch ours at LPS. So I saw a large contingency working with the aviation programs and just all of those external things at North Star, and I thought it was really cool. So I was curious if they were all growing as well as I saw that.
Yes. Yep.
Good.
Seeing growth at every high school site.
Perfect.
Other
Thank you,
questions?
Ms. Danik. Sorry about the microwave. Are
It's
there any
okay.
questions from members of the board?
No, this is my favorite program, what we do.
It is good stuff.
Agreed.
Ms. Bennett, thank you again
Yeah.
for your presentation. Thank you.
Oh, wait, I do have one more. When you talked about the funding, maybe 10 years ago, funding was always a struggle. It looks like it's not perfect, but we've got it braided funding so much better now that we're more sustainable.
Yeah, I would say, there's lots of different contributions that have created what feels like a more sustainable system. Certainly that 21st century money that continues to, be renewed with each of our grants every 5 years is that baseline funding that we sort of start all of our sites with. The funding that comes through the Safe and Successful Kids has certainly been something that has been acknowledged on a national level as a real community contribution to our CLC system, and I've actually had students who are looking at sustainability funding for community learning center systems reach out and ask for documents that have that this group has approved to give as an example of how communities can kind of back up their CLC systems. Certainly, continued programming funding that we've been able to access really and leverage as a result of this community contribution, I think has helped to stabilize the system. We know over the next couple of years then with the ESSER infusions, both from the LPS infusion of funding as well as pending funding coming from the state ESSER allocation, that we hope to continue to expand the excellent programming as well as sustain staffing challenges that our agencies have faced over the last couple of years. So we hope that we'll be able to strategically use those dollars to really create a solid system so that as we come out of those additional dollars being infused, we've made a great case for that sustainability funding going forward.
Well, I noticed because I'm old enough and board service long enough that I remember when we only had one.
Yeah.
And now we're across the entire city and appreciated by so many families. And I want to take a moment to, from the school perspective, hopefully I reiterate what Don would say, is that we are so appreciative to have our city as a partner across the nation. People are dying to figure out how we did that. And I said, we just live in a really special place.
We
So
do.
I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. And segueing from that city special praise contribution, Mayor Gaylor Baird.
Well, thank you. We certainly do value our partnership with LPS, and I am aware of the philanthropic interest across the country in trying to understand how this model works and how could it be replicated. So that's just another way that you're leading the way. I was just curious, and given all we've been through and knowing that the Safe and Successful Kids Interlocal, part of the purpose was to beef up resources for behavioral health that could be delivered not just during the school day with the addition of social workers, but also in the after-school time when parents might be more able to be a support to kids in need of services. Have you been able to observe in your special capacity in this special time after school, observe or refer, or sort of has that been disrupted? What does that picture look like in the CLC's portfolio?
That's a great question. So during the pandemic, we definitely had periods of time where we weren't allowing parents to come into the buildings, but what we were able to do, and what a lot of our therapists did when they had meetings with families, was do that virtually. And so that was kind of a different way of approaching that mental health piece, but definitely was a way to bridge that or approach that opportunity for that family therapy piece. And so now as we're moving into being able to have families come back into the building, that's something that we're offering for those families who were having those family therapy sessions virtually, being able to offer that as an in-person experience now going forward. So we haven't seen a lot of that in-person experience, but we definitely saw a lot of that creative approach. Because we had to be creative, and we learned that it maybe wasn't going to be as hard to do therapy virtually as we had once thought that it was. So blessing in disguise, I guess.
And do you feel that families and participants really have a good sense that those services are available? I mean, how is...
Yes, yeah. So for the students who are receiving therapeutic services in the buildings, those therapists have really done a great job of reaching out to families and offering that extended experience to really help their whole family, and as well as the support of the student that the student is receiving during the daytime as well. So I think they've done a great job of communicating that, and I hope that that continues to grow as we come back out of the pandemic and recognize that probably more than ever our students and families are needing that behavioral health support.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Mayhew?
Nola, thanks for the report. You mentioned staffing a couple of times. You talked about recent staffing, and then in response to Mrs. Danick's question, you talked about staffing in terms of sustainability. With the school district, we have some positions that we are struggling to fill still. Bus drivers, for example, it feels like we're always a little bit behind. How would you characterize staffing levels for the CLCs and right now? And do you anticipate in the next few years, what are the things that you anticipate us needing to focus on in terms of appropriate staffing?
Great question. So it has been very difficult. We have had sites that have had pretty significant interruptions in programming. If nothing else, they've had to cut down the number of students that they can accept in programming because they have their licensed sites that are tied to ratios of 1 adult to 15 students. And so, if staffing is low, that means we can take less students. So that has been difficult. It has gotten better. It's getting better progressively as people are getting vaccinated, as just the pandemic has slowed down, as people are feeling more like they can get out into the world again and be among people. So we do see the staffing numbers getting better. I think there's a few things that we've done to sort of strategically help support that. One of those things being, I think the wraparound will help a lot with just giving those part-time staff who maybe would have not had employment over the summer, and so they would have had to go find other jobs. Then in the fall, we have to rehire all those positions. This way they can stay employed throughout the summer and then start back up again in the fall. So I think that that's been a benefit. We've also really been doing a lot of work with just our HR departments and all of our agency partners hiring, offering hiring fairs. We were just at the university last week recruiting. We've been out to the Career Academy and recruiting Career Academy students to come work in CLCs after school. So it is getting better. I do think it's a long-term challenge. One of the things that our partners have had to do is increase wages. Some of them have been able to do that with some CARES Act funding. That was a temporary increase in hourly wage, but we've seen hourly wage for part-time staff go from like $9 an hour to up to $12. Some of them are looking at like close to $15 an hour. So that's huge increase in expense for our agency partners. And I would say going forward, that is the thing that we're gonna have to be the most focused on, is making sure that the salaries and the hourly wages that our employees are earning are competitive with other opportunities in the community. There's lots of, fast food places that you can go to and make more than that per hour. So I think that that's going to be our biggest focus over the next few years, is that retention, recruitment and retention of staff.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments?
I do.
Yeah. Mr.
Real
McGinnis.
quick, I just want to thank you for the report and all the hard work you've done. This really does kind of warm my heart, because I was here early on when we were struggling every year to find funding. Every year is the 21st century grant. And we're going, are we going to get it? Are we going to get it? How are we going to do this and everything? I just want to thank you for creating such a nice, robust, a little more robust program. And how good it does for our city is great, and all the work you've done. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
So on our agenda, we should have a public hearing portion of the program. I'm going to open it briefly. Anyone like to comment? Seeing no one coming forward, I'd like to thank you again, Ms. Bennett, for your report. And I'd like to ask you to help me with item 6 on the agenda, if you would. A resolution recognizing and thanking Barb Bartles for her contribution.
Yep. So as you all know, Barb Bartle retired from the Lincoln Community Foundation at the end of 2021, and Barb has been an integral part of every step of the development of community learning centers all along the way over the last 21 years. So I am very honored to read a resolution honoring her. And Barb is not able to be here today. She's in Poland, as you can imagine, helping with refugee resettlement of the Ukrainians in Poland. So I will read this, and then we will get this to Barb after she returns to the States. Whereas Barb Bartle has served as a public school educator for 7 years, as well as the president of the Foundation for Lincoln Public Schools for 18 years, and whereas during her tenure with Foundation for Lincoln Public Schools, Ms. Bartle wrote and submitted the first grant that ultimately resulted in the city's Community Learning Center initiative, and whereas the CLC initiative has since grown to support successful youth, thriving families, and strong neighborhoods at locations in 29 community schools across the city of Lincoln. And whereas Ms. Bartle has tirelessly advocated for sustainable funding and community investment in the CLC initiative, and whereas Ms. Bartle recently retired after almost 12 years as the president at the Lincoln Community Foundation, where she focused on identifying and responding to the needs of all Lincolnites. Whereas under her leadership at the Lincoln Community Foundation, the number of donor funds more than quadrupled, assets grew from $62 million to $175 million, annual grants to the community increased from $4 million to more than $21 million, more than $40 million was raised during Give to Lincoln Day, which Ms. Bartle initiated. More than $2.4 million was raised during Lincoln Little's Giving Day to help children from lower income families with early childhood education. More than $1.2 million was raised to assist 66 nonprofits serving the most vulnerable populations during the COVID-19 pandemic. the first community land trust in Nebraska was established to address affordable housing in Lincoln, and Lincoln vital signs, as well as Prosper Lincoln, were established to guide Lincoln's vision toward a stronger, more diverse, and more innovative community. And whereas Lincoln owes Ms. Bartle a debt of gratitude for her tireless work as a visionary leader, community builder, and connector of the public, private, nonprofit, and philanthropic segments of Lincoln, now, therefore, be it resolved by the Safe and Successful Kids Interlocal Board of the City of Lincoln, Nebraska, that the board thanks Ms. Bartle for her nearly 5 decades of fundraising, community development, teaching, and community engagement. That the board wishes Ms. Bartle a happy and healthy retirement.
Mr. Mayhew.
You want to wrestle?
Go for it.
It is with great pleasure and gratitude that I would move approval of this resolution.
Well, since I have to sign it, if Richard wants to second.
Well, I'll get a
we'll let him.
second, then we'll keep talking. Somebody? Second, thank you, Mayor. Now, everybody keep piling it on. Accolades. Ms. Mayhew, Ms. Danik.
I can't think of anyone who deserves a bigger thank you
Agreed.
than Barb Bartlett. She kind of took LPS kicking and screaming when this started. And to those who were here at the beginning, it was kicking and screaming because it was like, what do you mean we aren't doing something well? And it was from someone not inside the network. And it was someone who wanted to raise the money and do it. And they went to Kansas City and they came back with a model. And I remember going over to Saratoga that very first year where they were honoring all of the community partners that were in working. And there were over 3,000 hours of volunteer service at Little Saratoga. Southeast developed a network, and they had kids getting all their governance out, their government citizenship issued class hours there every day for that entire year. The neighbors built a senior group that came in as grandparents across the Saratoga area. That's when it was kind of like our only one. And what has been done here, we probably couldn't have done without that fundraising effort. So I am so appreciative, and thank you.
Other comments from the board? Yes, good, thank you.
Yeah, it just is, it's the power of partnerships across the sectors and all the good that that's done for children and families in our community, and the level of awareness that she's raised, I think, through the Prosper Lincoln initiative, through the vital signs. She's elevated the community conversation and really educated everyone, business leaders, nonprofit leaders, about sort of what's at stake and how everyone has a role to play, and we're all benefiting from that. And of course, how fitting that she is in her capacity as district governor for Rotary, helping to house folks who have fled Ukraine and to transport supplies into Ukraine. It's just seems fitting that she's not here to receive this recognition.
Not surprising, yeah. Other comments from the board? Thank you very much, and I would like to, we'll figure out some way to get this signed, and please get this to Ms. Bartles as soon as she returns. Ms. Bennett, thank you for helping us with that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Pardon? Oh, that's right, I'm sorry. Thank you, Ms. Danik. We have a motion and second on the floor, but we have not taken a roll call vote. Please, Ms. Quinn, would you help us with that?
Yes.
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 Yes. Yay, thank you, Ms. Danik. That takes us to our next item on our agenda, a staff report, and Dr. Neal and Ms. Pierce, would you help us with that?
Sure will. First one will be relatively quick. My name is Denise Pierce. I'm with Lincoln Parks and Rec. You might recall that last summer we updated our interlocal agreement between the city and LPS. We do need to make some changes to our rules of governance, which are basically our bylaws for the board. Unfortunately, the current rules of government say that I need all 6 of you here, and I need all 6 of you to vote for the changes. We're obviously missing someone today, so at this point I would ask for you for a motion to carry it over to our next meeting, and we're hoping that we'll have everybody there in September to pass these changes.
Motion by Ms. Danik, can I
I
get a
would make
second?
that motion.
Second.
Second by Mr. McGinnis. We have a motion and second to carry this agenda item over to our next meeting in September. Yes, Ms. Danik.
Can we please make sure all 6 of us know we have to be there for that meeting?
We're going to try awfully hard.
Do you have the date for the next meeting?
We do. It's actually at the bottom of your agenda. I believe it is September 22nd. We had voted on that date with the last calendar. But we will check in with folks to make sure that continues to work for everyone, because I know that was set a while ago.
Any other comment, any additional comments on this agenda item? Mr. Mayhew?
Quick question. With the school district, when we run into a situation like this, we can vote to ignore our own
Suspend.
policy or suspend our own policy. Is that a concept here?
Let me check with the city law department on that. If we run into another meeting where we can't get everyone, we may have to look into doing something like that. So thank you for that suggestion.
Other comments? Just-
Well, that might be a change to put in our governance. We could have 5 out of 6 vote on something. Because I think when we originally started, it was 2 from each side, so.
And that is one of the changes you'll be voting on, is
Oh,
changing the
yay,
rules
okay.
for changing bylaws going forward.
Because that restriction for all 6 is only regarding the rules of governance.
Rules of governance.
Other comments? Seeing none, would you please call the roll on our motion to delay, for lack of a better word? Yeah.
Kathy,
Yes.
Don,
Yes.
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 Yes. Thank you very much. Explain to me levels of service.
Sure. Going back to the interlocal agreement changes that we adopted last summer, you might remember that we moved away as a board from those formal budgeting processes. We used to have 2 budget meetings a year. With those interlocal changes, we moved away from that formal budgeting process and instead decided that as a board, we would focus on levels of service in those 3 programmatic areas that are set forth in the interlocal agreement. So that would be the mental health component, and that's the preventive programming that's outlined in the interlocal agreement. We heard about that last August. We also have the school resource officers, the SROs, along with the threat assessment team. We heard from that group, the proactive programming, back in November. And then, of course, the third component is our CLCs, our proactive programming that we heard about from NOLA today. So John and I, as well as other city staff and LPS staff, have had some discussions about levels of service for the 2022-23 school year. And at this point, we anticipate that those levels of service will be substantially similar to the current year. On the city side, with respect to those SROs, we have those. We anticipate those 6 SROs will continue in middle schools. We have those 6 SROs in the high schools. And then, of course, we have the Northwest High School that'll be opening this fall. And my understanding that LPS and LPD will be having conversations about that school and what level of service will occur there this spring and summer. On the CLC side then, the City Parks and Rec Department will continue to be the lead agency or the core service provider, Holly and her team, at the 5 sites that we currently serve. That's the Belmont, the Calvert, Arnold, McPhee, and Everett. And then the city also provides grant funding to Pershing, Mickle, and Park. And we anticipate that that will continue. I'll turn it over to John to talk a little bit on the LPS side.
So first on the mental health, we've seen great success in the impact of the mental health services that have been provided through the preventive programming from the Safe and Successful Kids. We see some slight adjustments in how the funding is used, in that we tend to plan on providing the same level of service, but some of the funding that comes from the SSK will go towards increase in salary and benefits for the social worker that coordinates those services and works with threat assessment. But we're able to backfill with additional grants that have been leveraged because of the funding that is provided by SSK to continue the same level of contracted mental health services to our students. So we'll be able to do both, stay caught up with our salary and benefits to our staff, but also continue all of our services. And that's made possible because of the investment you've made has allowed us to attract other grants to cover, to backfill those services. So that's what we plan for mental health. We'll see something a little bit the same with CLCs, in that the question you asked, Mr. Mayhew, is very important, in that we've really struggled at times with ensuring adequate programming in CLCs across the community. So we'd like to use some of the programming money originally earmarked for programming, to help with some one-time funding to ensure that we have adequate staffing. Because of the funding that's been provided for SSK, we've been able to leverage some additional grant funding for programming through other philanthropic organizations to allow us to continue the programming. So we'll take some of the SSK money meant for programming, help with some one-time funding for staffing to ensure that we're able to provide enough staff that our ratios of 1 to 15 don't cause us to have to limit what we provide at our schools, and then use some of the outside grant funding to continue to pay for programming. So same level of service, used slightly differently this coming year, but we anticipate the same level of service in all of our buildings. So when you look, you've heard us say across all three areas in SROs, we're looking to make that adjustment at Northwest. For the mental health, some slight adjustments, but continue to provide the same level of service, and then the same with CLCs. Any additional?
No, I think you covered it, John. I think we just wanted, again, to bring to the board's attention, we don't anticipate any service changes, but as you all are heading into your budget cycles, wanted to include that on the agenda in case there's anything the board wanted to discuss as you're heading into your respective budget processes.
Questions from the board? Comments? Okay, are there other items you'd like to discuss during this portion? No? Okay, I'm looking at Dr. Neal and Ms. Pierce.
Nope.
Nope. All righty. Thank you very much. That takes us down to one of my favorite items on the agenda. If there's nothing, Mr. McGinnis.
Move for adjournment?
I like the way you say that. Ms. Danik, would you
I
like
would
to help us?
second that.
Oh, I like, this is going really well. I have a motion and a second to adjourn. There's no discussion necessary for that. Madam Quinn, would you call the roll, please?
Yes.
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 Before I say yes, I'd like to thank the staff for their hard work. We only meet 4 times a year at best, considering COVID, but you guys are out there pressing the flesh and doing the work every day. And you come back and you tell us what's going well, what's going bad, and how we can help. And we don't acknowledge that enough. Thank you very much for what you do to make our community better. Thank you. And a yes to my adjourn.